had said, but before that I'd like to call for apologies. I have received one from Councillor Baldock for lateness. There are no other apologies. Can I have somebody move that apology? Moved by Councillor Salisbury, seconded by the Mayor. I'll put that. All those in favour please say aye. Against and carried. Mr Adshead, you're very familiar with Council. Please, you've got 10 minutes to speak to us, and if you finish a little earlier, some of my colleagues may have some questions for you. So over to you, the time is yours.
Thank you very much and good morning. The reason for me being here today, I've lived in the Mount for some 13 years, and this problem has gradually came to a head over the last Christmas period. I can show you the scars on legs where I've actually been run into by dogs. And I had my grandchildren here from Australia. On the first 2 mornings down on the beach, the younger of the two, a young girl, was really traumatized by big dogs approaching her. And I thought enough's enough, and this is when I started to get in touch with Council. We live in an absolutely unbelievably beautiful place in the world, and the beaches we have are absolutely superb. I've done the south of France, and it doesn't even get close to Mount Maunganui. It really doesn't. And if we've got this, then I think everybody should be allowed to use it. I know of older people that will not go near the beach for the fear of dogs and being run over. I've just completed a course run by government to stop old people falling over. And the beaches, when the dogs start in the packs, and this is what unfortunately happens, is that a number of people to get together, they all have dogs, and you look up the beach and suddenly there's 6 or 8 dogs charging towards you following one. If one likes to get close to humans, then you can be in trouble. All I'm asking for, I don't want to ban dogs. I've had a dog. And I don't want to ban dogs from the beach. What I want to do is give everybody a fair crack of the whip. That from midnight to 9 a.m. in the morning, if you got the big dogs, you want to run them on the beach, run them, free. But from 9 o'clock in the morning until around 4 o'clock in the afternoon, give everybody the opportunity. You can have your dog on the beach, but it's got to be on a lead and totally under control. And from 4 o'clock onwards again, people can take the dogs down there and run free. That gives mothers with children the opportunity to get good time on the beach with the children. It gives older people a good time for a walk in the morning and a walk in the afternoon without fear of being run over by the dogs. We know there's been dog attacks on the beach. There has been in the past and there will be in the future. So we can stop this just by not taking anything away from anybody, just saying there's a right time to do it for your circumstance. And that's all I'm asking you to do. Create a bylaw that says dogs on leads. Policing it will be difficult, I know this. But I think if the Mayor and Council get a little campaign going to get it out there, and then hope, as we've been so disciplined through the COVID, just maybe we'll start policing ourselves as we did with distance. And this might be the right time to do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Adshead. Any questions, colleagues? Councillor Hughes, you look like you're ready to ask a question.
So what part of the beach do you walk on mostly? What area do you find them?
I walk from Sutherland through Leisure Island and up towards Main Beach. Yep. But I think when you look at the beach, I think in the council bylaw it's 225 yards or something from Main Beach. But I think it should go from totally from Leisure Island down to Papamoor, to the end of Papamoor. If we're going to do this fairly, there's a lot of old people's homes further down the beach in towards Papamoor. And I personally think there's no real problem with this. Everybody can take the dog on the beach at any time of the day. All I'm asking for is a period of time that older people can do something with a little bit more relaxation. There's so many people do have a fear of dogs and won't go near, and the beach is a fantastic place for them to be, but they won't go. And they should have that right.
Thank you.
Thank you, John. Oh, Mayor Powell. Yep.
Very much for presenting, much appreciated. So I'm not really asking this to staff, and I think Barbara's not here, but do we know about the incidence of dog attacks on the beach? Can we perhaps find that out? I think it'd be interesting to understand what the reported frequency is. Thank you.
Yes, colleagues, if we could perhaps have circulated incidents report, that would be appreciated.
Can I just add something there? We don't report every attack. I can show you the scars on my legs. And I'm not a medical person, but lower down in your bottom of your shin, when I walked into the doctor and said, oh, could I get this plaster on this or something? I was in the doctor's anyway, not for this. And there was a panic. You can't get injured down there. This can be very serious. And I thought, wow, what's going on here? But those parts of your legs, if you get disease into them, can be very, very serious. But we don't report them.
Councillor Kitty.
Yeah, I'd like to say thank you very much for your presentation, because I also share a fear of dogs, so I know exactly what you're talking about. And I think it's not just for the elderly. I think we've got a lot of young children down on the beaches as well. And I too don't want people to stop walking dogs. But if they had leads, and that's basically what you're saying, is if the dogs were kept on leads, like COVID, and we were down there every day, and they were on leads, and it made a huge difference. So thanks very much for taking the time to come in.
Thank you.
Thank you, John. So the process from here, Council today is considering its prioritisation of bylaws. So we've got a lot of bylaws to review and policies, well, one bylaw and a bunch of policies to review. So Council will consider today whether it wants to bring a review of the dogs bylaw or the beaches bylaw forward. I think it was adopted only a couple of years ago after some quite wide consultation, so that it may not be something that Council wants to review at this time, but that will come up shortly in the agenda. So thank you for speaking and bringing it forward to us.
Could I just finally say that the time of 9 till 4 was sort of, in my mind, a common sense time, and to do it winter and summer so that people get used to it. But that is not set in concrete, obviously, and you have to decide even whether you want to do it and over what time that you do. Thank you.
Thank you, John.
And thank you for listening to me
Cheers.
this morning.
Okay, colleagues, there are no late items. Confidential business to be transferred into the open. What I'm proposing is that we have one set of confidential minutes, and what I'm proposing is that we actually just approve those minutes in public rather than having to close and open and then reclose again. But I just want to signal, is there any matters likely to arise from those confidential minutes? Or any discussion? No? Okay, that's fine. I will put them in public. Then we have no change to the order of business in terms of... Yes, hello, Rose. No change to the order of business. The confirmation of minutes, we have quite a series of minutes between pages 10 and 58, and also the confidential minutes, which I will put separately. Are there any additions or changes to those minutes as a matter of record? Those are the public ones first, before we move into matters arising. I don't detect any around the room. Is somebody prepared to move in total the 5 sets of minutes there? Moved by Councillor Salisbury. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Clout. I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Abstentions? That is carried. The confidential minutes, can I have a mover for those minutes? Moved by Councillor Baldock. Seconded by Councillor Salisbury. I will put that. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Abstentions, that is carried. So there's now no longer any need for us to go into confidential at the end of the meeting. If you will, are there any declarations of conflicts of interest, colleagues? There are none. We will get straight into the business. 8.1 on page 68. Page 68 of your agenda, the policy and bylaw program, and we've just referred to that. Mr. Adsett has referred to a particular bylaw that he would like us to look at. So that's on page 68 of your agenda. And I'll pass over to Jeremy Bowes and Ariel King. Thank you.
Good morning, thank you. This morning we just wanted to go through the next iteration of the policy and bylaw program. So you might recall in November we brought that to you, and it had set out the policies and bylaws that we had underway at that time. You'll see that a number of those have been completed, and now we have the next iteration. So there is the program, which the first table attached to the agenda item sets out the policies and bylaws that we currently have underway, and table 2 sets out those policies, that we are intending to bring forward and work on over the next 6 months. And happy to take any questions on those.
Any questions of the prioritisation program, colleagues? Councillor Robson.
Yeah, it's obviously following the submission this morning in the public forum, what would be the impact of placing consideration of that issue inside this program in terms of resourcing, in terms of timing, in terms of what it might displace? What would be the impact of putting that issue into the program?
It would displace some of the work that we're currently doing. We have some work that we can't take out of the program, but it would displace some of the others that we have underway, and some of those are probably towards the end of table 1, such things like the backflow prevention policy and our smoke-free policy. It would also mean that we probably couldn't bring forward some of the policies that we have as proposed additions to the program as well. The bylaw itself, in terms of a review process, it would be determined about what the scale of change was and how significant that was.
Councillor Hughes.
Just in terms of the same policy there's we have heard that there is some problems with dogs in terms of the natural habitat and the birds down there, that there's been issues with the penguins, etc., since the bylaw was changed. So that's another reason, I think, to have a look at this bylaw.
Any further questions, colleagues? Councillor Robson.
Question to the chair. Obviously you're familiar with the workload as chair. In terms of getting the issue around dogs, and it now has at least 2 dimensions, and I'm sure there are others. When things come to the surface and become public, people sort of declare other interests. What process, what's the simplest way of getting a motion in front of you? Are you happy to take a movement of the recommended plus an additional item?
Yes, it depends on what the item is and the scope of it, I suppose. Council adopted the bylaw in 2018 after wide public consultation. That being said, if there is a groundswell within our community or significant concern or a wish to change, then we of course should respond. So what I suggest we do is that we get a paper, or not necessarily a report, but guidance from staff back in writing in terms of the implications of making even minor changes to a bylaw, such as the beaches bylaw or the dogs bylaw, both 2018. And we can consider whether that's something that we want to look at further. So what I'm proposing is we get an email back from staff just advising us in terms of the implications of opening up that process again, because it does require quite wide consultation. I would make the observation from the chair that certainly beaches and dog bylaw issues, if a council of the day wished to review them, I think a council could do it actually annually, because it's something which people are quite passionate about, as opposed to backflow prevention, which is something that would sit within the 10-year review. So if that's acceptable to the member, I mean, you're free to move an amendment or move anything you like when we get to it. but that would be my proposed course of action going forward.
Yeah, I mean,
Councillor.
in
Yep.
reply, I'm happy with that process as long as obviously it comes back to us quite quickly and perhaps it goes on to a decision goes on to the agenda, or an option for a decision, a public decision goes on to the agenda of the next policy committee. Thank you.
We can absolutely do that. Councillor Arbery.
Can we also just get a copy of the previous submissions when we went through this process last time, just to become more familiar with the issues?
Fantastic idea. Thank you. Christine Jones.
So just in terms of that, I think if a report comes back, we would need to cover the issues that came up last time in terms of dogs, the level of issues that have been reported, and probably some advice from the animal control team about what their views are about what's happening, because in terms of, while not everything's reported, they've probably got quite a good visibility of what's going on, so you're a bit more informed when you make a decision. The other issue is to get guidance from you of scope, because once you open up beaches bylaw, there's a whole series of issues about horses on beaches. Tangata Whenua have got this is a significant issue for them, and it's really, we'd need direction as staff as, are you reviewing, if you decide to review in terms of dogs, is it only dogs? Or are you opening the whole bylaw up and doing a comprehensive review? That's quite a significant. So I think the paper that comes to you needs to explore those options so that you can give clear guidance and that you have an understanding of the scale of what you'll be opening up, because this is always quite a controversial topic. So.
Colleagues, what I'd suggest we do is that when we do move to resolution time, that we actually deal with that by resolution. So you could, for example, say, I move a C or a B, that staff report back on the dogs and beaches bylaw, or words to that effect. That way we deal with it by resolution, it's voted on by majority, and then staff can go away and produce that paper. Councillor Hughes.
Could we just add to that something from the natural habitats team to the effect on, since from the last 2 years, if there's been any effect on wildlife?
Talk to the Parks and Rec team on that.
Okay, good, thank you. Any further questions of the report that's on the agenda today? Colleagues, do you need a minute or two in order to come up with a resolution B? Okay, we'll just adjourn for 2 minutes. Just 2 minutes. Councillor Robson?
Just quickly.
Yep.
It is, as you've said, a significant issue. I think the suggestion by Councillor Arbery is bang on the button. We need to make sure we're across previous submissions. We're not trying to constrain or direct staff too narrowly. We just want to make sure that the specific topics are reflected in whatever report comes back. And obviously, at that point, we will have some information and we can consider this thing in an appropriate manner. But yeah, it's not to constrain staff, but to make sure we cover the two specific topics of today.
Thank you. Seconder wish to speak? Do you want to turn your microphone off, Councillor Robson? Yeah.
No, I'm fine, thanks.
Any other speakers for the resolution that is now on the table? No. In that case, I will put the resolution. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Abstentions? I declare that carried unanimously. Thank you. Moving on to the second item on the agenda today, which is stating the strategic direction for the long-term plan. So speaking to that, we have Fiona Norder and Jeremy Bowes. Thank you. And just acknowledging, colleagues, I've seen the emails that have come through over the last sort of 12 hours in relation to elected members getting involved in the strategy and the vision, so thank you.
I think I was on here, is it? Why am I driving then? So I'll start off briefly and then hand over the technical difficult stuff to Fiona. What you see on the screen is a pretty version of the shorthand long arm conversation we've had a few times in the past. So when we started this process 6 months ago, I suppose, something like that, around Christmas, the intention, the ideal would have been to have a very inclusive city-wide process to create a city-wide vision owned by the city, not by council, all in time for the LTP. To do that, we would have had to have basically worked 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and it required all our partners to do exactly the same, and concertina down a 18-month process into about 9. The executive signed off on a compromise, which was to split it into 2 processes. This is where the short arm and the long hand. 2 processes running in parallel. The 18-month process, which is the fully inclusive, engage everybody, ask lots of questions, open questions, take a long view to create a multi-agency owned city vision with council's elements of that dropping out by the side. In the meantime, we needed to do something for the LTP. And we needed to have that basic direction for the LTP to allow staff to have a sort of view as to what they're aiming for, to allow us to start to build the prioritization process around something. So you take the community outcomes and principles with the 4 well-beings and build that prioritization around, similar to the way we did for the annual plan and a bit of a rush. So we've created 2 processes. What you've got today is effectively towards the end of the left-hand process, all of which becomes part of the long-term process. This is why the 2 things are in parallel. We take where we get to here and we meld it into that longer-term city-wide multi-agency approach. That project will kick off again very shortly. In fact, we've got a phone call tomorrow morning with stakeholder strategies, 9 o'clock tomorrow morning, which will just reinvigorate what was intended to happen in April, but which got March and April, but which got COVIDed and therefore put on hold. So where we are today is towards the top of that left-hand side. We've taken the community outcomes. In fact, Fiona will talk through this better in a moment. But just remember that this is the compromise. This short-term piece of work is not the full, widely engaged piece of work we would have hoped to have done, which we will be doing on the right-hand side. But this is just the starting point to have something in place, something refreshed, something with your name on it for the LTP. Your turn.
Hello. As Jeremy suggested, this is sort of a pragmatic approach in the interim before we can do that wider city vision work. But we wanted to take the opportunity to cross-reference the existing community outcomes that we have in our current LTP with recent engagement work, with the information we've gathered through things such as the Vital Update survey, and refresh them slightly to make sure that they have in line with what our community has told us more recently over the past 2 or 3 years. So attached to this report was a strategic directions paper, and within that there is a matrix that shows you how we have cross-referenced our existing outcomes under the last LTP with recent feedback from the community, and come up with some sort of slightly amended community outcomes that we're proposing for this LTP as interim outcomes until we complete the city-wide vision work. So these outcomes, they support the 4 wellbeing elements under the LGA. They respond to some of our issues for our city, in particular around transport and city planning and growth. And they are fairly in line with what you will see across New Zealand for other major cities, but definitely based on what our residents have told us as well. And we're also proposing a new set of draft principles, and they are to replace the commitment statements that we've got in the current LTP. So these draft principles, they're about how we do our business, how as an organisation we say we're going to operate when we're making decisions, planning our services and our projects. They are very strongly grounded in our responsibilities under the Local Government Act, and they also reflect what we've heard through engagement. We have added a new draft principle that doesn't correlate to any of the existing commitment statements, that is about listening to our community and making transparent and evidence-based decisions. And we'd like to take that forward into the LTP. So how it all fits together, what we would ideally like to do is take these draft community outcomes out for some sort of brief consultation and start talking to our community about prioritisation. We're really interested in whether or not they have strong feelings about any one of those outcomes as being more important than others, and why that is. So that we can combine that with internal work around growth projections, our financial position, legislative requirements, and start to build up a sort of a more transparent and evidence-based way to prioritise our decisions, that we can clearly show and say, look, this is how we've allocated our resources in the LTP. And so that's what we're seeking today, is the ability to take that out to the community and have that consultation. There would be further consultation and more dialogue occurring, as Jeremy says, in a much more open and deep way via that longer project. And that brings us to the recommendations.
Okay, thank you. Question, if we didn't have the imposition of lockdown and COVID-19, what sort of engagement would have occurred with elected members prior to the presentation of this paper? Would we have been looking at a workshop, or what sort of engagement would there have been with elected members to try and get buy-in?
Before, I mean, we've been to a number of executive briefings around this. So we had an executive briefing in February. You then did the work with WSP on the Future Ready work in February. When we brought the Vital Updates information to you in April, we went through the same process, and we had that conversation there. And of course, the WSP work and the Vital Updates work is all leading into this. The matrix that Fiona was talking about brings those pieces of work together. The 4,800 people who submitted, gave us information through Vital Updates. That is current information. The strategy stocktake, which we undertook, the WSP work, the environmental scan they did. It all comes into this as well as coming into the long arm piece of work as well. And we also talked about this project in particular, the engagements. We had a briefing on the engagement stuff about middle of May, I think it was, something like that. So we've brought bits and pieces to you. If we weren't in a COVID world, this would have been a fraction more accelerated. We'd have had these conversations probably a month ago, something like that. But because a lot of this team were taken out during the COVID process on the SIP stuff, on the service level reviews, on the rewriting the annual plan, we're just shuffling things down the track.
Implications of delaying the adoption of this paper today and calling a workshop for elected members to discuss and engage with the strategic framework and also the community outcomes?
The implications depend on the length of delay. If it delays a week or two, not much, that's fine. The intention really is to start to have these community outcomes locked down for this LTP and only for this LTP, because the long arm process will supersede them soon afterwards. But to lock them in so that the staff who are preparing budgets, who are preparing projects, who are preparing business cases, who are preparing capital works, they know they've got that vision as to what we're aiming for. Now, take a couple of weeks out of that, we're okay. Take a couple of months out of that, and we're going to have to fill the gap with something. So we talk about prioritization quite a lot around this table. These will become part of that prioritization matrix. Now, that will not be perfect. And every time we do a prioritization process, somebody will say it doesn't work because, and they're right. No prioritization is perfect. But as we did with the annual plan, it gives you a starting point for those conversations. So you take these, for instance, when you looked at your activity levels, plans for each of the activities, you'll be assessing those against the outcomes. How is this activity furthering the outcomes? So if we delayed for a long time, we'd have to fill a gap with something which would probably be the old ones, which are probably not as good as the new ones.
Okay, a couple of questions. Councillor Kitty, then Mayor Powell.
First of all, thank you. I did read, obviously, the report and was pleased to see that the community's priorities and values are going to form a lot of the investment statements for the LTP, so that was really nice to read in there. I'm really keen for it to be delayed slightly, just for the fact that I'm wondering if it's going to confuse people going out to consultation. We've got the AP and the LTP all sort of blending in together, so just wondering if that could be delayed. That might be a sensible choice so that we can focus on, in the next short-term period, obviously getting our AP sorted and then fully going out to consultation for this after that. That would be my opinion. How do you feel about that?
That's within that 2-week delay sort of thing, which is doable. It's not ideal for us, but it's doable, yep.
Mayor Powell.
Jeremy and Fiona, thank you for the work you've done on this. I really just wanted to commend you on it. I love the headings. I think you've covered not only the 4 well-beings, but it's really the inclusive process has been, for me, really great. The build-up from the vital signs, from the investment thinking that's gone into this, I think is really, really good, and look forward to the public consultation. Personally, I mean, it's very, very easy to nitpick on strategy, and this is a strategic document. I can't imagine why we delay it, so thanks for the work.
Any questions? Councillor Hughes and then Councillor Clout.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, the words, and they're pretty broad, and they fit in with the government statements as well. I can't see that that there would be too much more to do on those. But I think from our perspective, understanding what this looks like in terms of the LTP process and where these fit in, and having a workshop around that before we go out would be really helpful, because we're the ones that are then going to be talking to our communities about this. So with 6 new councillors here that have never been through an LTP process, it would just be really helpful within the next couple of weeks if we could possibly have that kind of session that just got us really familiar with where these fit in and how this all comes together.
Councillor Clout.
Yeah, thank you. I definitely concur with that. So I just guess my question is, if there was a couple of weeks delay, it would come then back to a council meeting rather than the next policy committee, which is like 6 weeks away, which would probably be too far out in the future. Just clarifying that.
Yeah, there are two ways that you could approach it. One, you could approve the the community outcomes today, subject to a workshop to get informed on it, or you could delay, leave it on the table, or in fact, if someone was prepared to move the recommendations, if the committee was of the view to vote it down, then we could organise that workshop, and that would come back at the earliest convenience for adoption following that workshop. So there's a couple of ways that members may wish to proceed when we get to that time. Any additional questions? Councillor Aubrey.
Yeah, so from your perspective, if we're to move something, would your preference be that we move getting the workshop and getting the consultation delayed but approving today so that you can carry on with the work, or would you prefer that we let it lie on the table? And I'd be happy to move the former.
I'm happy to speak to that. I think from our perspective, if you don't think you're going to be significantly changing the wording, and we've looked at this, we've looked at other councils and metros, and they're quite similar. The issue comes when you then translate that later on through into your LTP, where you define for yourselves how that works. If we could have the statements approved, then we can move on preparing for the consultation engagement, and then the briefing will, the workshop or briefing will more be about how does that flow through into the LTP? What does that process look like, and what's the LTP decision-making process? In exploring that concept, I think more so, but we could hold off actually going out to consultation until you've had that, and then just do an informal check-in. Are you still comfortable with what you've approved? If you still are, then we can move forward. Otherwise, we're back into putting another agenda out, and there's another couple of days, and it's just pushed it another week. So it's really about trying to move it at pace, but we could do an informal check-in. If you felt after your workshop that you were uncomfortable, we would hold and come back.
A question from Councillor Baldock and then Robson.
Yeah, that kind of was my question. I think Jaco's come up with a good solution. We do need to keep moving, but we do need to be aware that we've all got to be brought along with it. So I'd second his motion if that was the case.
Thank you for identifying that. Councillor Robson?
Yeah, I'm with Councillor Baldock, happy to third the motion. I think it's a good approach.
Okay, thank you. Are there any further questions on that particular paper? Do I have a mover for the recommendations? And of course, we can schedule a workshop subsequent to discuss if that passes. Do I have a mover for the recommendations? Moved by Councillor Aubrey, seconded by Councillor Baldock. And over to you, Councillor Aubrey, to speak to it.
Yeah, I think the shorthand, long arm concept is good to keep in mind. We're going to do our proper strategic piece of work over the next 18 months. So this is just something interim, to get us to the LTP and through that discussion. So yeah, I would just like to make clear that in the movement it is subject to a workshop and having the consultation delayed until after the annual plan consultation. But yeah, I think it's a good approach to keep us moving and give staff some direction that we're broadly okay with the direction they're taking.
Thank you. Just before the second, I'll just confer with staff. Are you clear that the intention is to have the workshop and then just delay it for a few weeks and then, yeah?
Yep. So we won't start any consultation. We'll plan it. We'll have the workshop. At the workshop, we'll do a check-in at the end to check you're comfortable that we continue to implement these resolutions. If there's any concern, we'll stop and come back for a further direction.
Thank you for that clarity. Seconder.
Yeah, as always, staff are very accommodating of our requests, and I appreciate that. The LTP just has to keep moving, otherwise we will find ourselves running into it at the end of the process and feeling very frustrated. We've got to keep going. But, and it is a big beast to get used to. And unfortunately, as you've said, Mr. Chairman, COVID has taken some time from us in this, but we just have to keep going. There's been through them a few times, and they keep snowballing, and if you haven't done enough initial work, and I know everyone's really concerned about engagement being right this time, so it's good for us to have a workshop on this before we start, but let's keep going.
Thank you. Any further speakers? Councillor Robson.
Yeah, I think it's really important. The workshop's more important than the broad description sort of accommodates And the reason for that is that the work on the LTP is actually in play now. So these decisions are actually the decisions that are going to inform the LTP discussions. If you run discussions in parallel, by the time you get to the end of those discussions, you've actually made all your decisions for the LTP. You can't consult, sorry, you see what I mean? The parallel thing. So what we come up with is in the short period is actually critical, and we need to own it. We need to own it. We can't drop the staff in this, nod it through, and then at some point in the process, wake up and go, actually, we're not comfortable with that third one. We need to own this. So the workshop is a really, really good approach. But I do stress the point that what comes out of this short period will be a big driver in terms of all the LTP discussions, all the work staff's doing. We're setting that over the next 2, 3, 4 weeks with community consultation. But Jaco's approach, absolutely.
Councillor Clout.
Thanks very much. I just draw the attention of anyone who's watching on YouTube that page 79 gives a good summary of the proposal in terms of the 5 refreshed community outcomes, and I think, you know, if we achieved all of those 5 as a council, I think we'd be doing very well, and the city would be a really great place to live. And also it talks about some of our principles as well down the left-hand side. So yeah, page 79 is a good reference point, but certainly endorse the approach taken. Thank you.
Any additional speakers before I invite the mover to give a right of reply? No additional speakers. Mover, do you wish to exercise a right of reply? No. That being the case, I will put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Abstentions? I declare it carried unanimously. Thank you, colleagues. There are no late items. There is no need for a public excluded section, given that we passed those minutes earlier on. So therefore, I declare the meeting closed.